Arc 6, The Corridor of Memories. Chapter 36, A Place of Relief. What do you mean when you say parallel world? Subaru felt as if his breath had been knocked out of him as he heard Echidna's question, sinking into silence as a result. During that time, everyone's gazes turned towards him. Although the emotions varied across everyone's faces, many of them showed tangible signs of doubt. Everyone was treating the term parallel world as something of an unknown. In other words, that meant the Natsuki Subaru before losing his memories had never bothered to explain it to them. Emilia, parallel world. Come to think of it, you used to say that before from time to time, didn't you, Subaru? Ram, it does ring a bell. Though from the way he acts like on a daily basis, I'd not paid any attention to that kind of nonsense. Subaru, putting Emilia-chan aside, it's incredible how indifferent Ram acts towards me. She came as a stark contrast to Emilia, who was adorably immersed deep in thought, a finger of her brushed against her lip. Ram had coldly snorted out a ha in response to Subaru's wry-faced remark. However, their initial surprise had been softened thanks to having left this one cushion behind. The previous Subaru had never bothered to speak up about the parallel world, not to Emilia or Ram, nor even to any of the others whom he'd supposedly adventured together with. He didn't know for sure what that meant, but... Subaru, were there some kind of restrictions to it? When I was thrown into this world, was I sworn by a god or goddess into not speaking about it, or the like? And first things first, what kind of mission am I here for? He cocked his head, however, not even the M of the mission he'd been entrusted with came to his mind. Presumably, Subaru was summoned into this parallel world by someone working behind the scenes that had some expectation of him. By Subaru's reckoning currently, the likelihood of this someone being sort of like a god was very high. This god or whatever that he didn't remember had given him some kind of role, and sent him to this parallel world. Thinking about it, this was the sort of promise you'd find with these parallel world thingamajigs. So, if losing his memories was something that this god found inconvenient, he could hopefully expect some follow-up to improve his situation. Subaru wants to believe this god is not the cruel sort, who would just throw him into this fantasy world without giving him some generous benefits. Or perhaps... Subaru, I'd better find out if it's actually something I can't touch on, huh? Beatrice, Subaru? Subaru licked his parched lips and searched for a response for this situation. He winked at Beatrice, who was looking at him with unease, having caught ear of his muttering. He decided that he would address the question that had been posed to him, about this parallel world. Even if by some chance speaking about it was forbidden by this god being, it was difficult to imagine there'd be some sort of drastic penalty that he couldn't recover from where he touched on this taboo. Surely, as soon as he would have spoke of the taboo, there wouldn't be anything drastic that would happen, such as being assailed by unbearable pain. With a little bit of anxiety, Subaru gently got his breathing under control. And... Subaru, well, about this parallel world I spoke of, the word itself is written as from like different and world. In other words, I mean that the place we're in right now is in a separate world. Emilia, in a separate world, a parallel world. Subaru, aha. That's why I say parallel world, yet. Following Subaru's explanation, Emilia mulled over what he'd said, rolling the words out on her tongue. She was not the only one who had reacted like this, the others in the room were also pondering over that word. As it was from the pronunciation, Ice Guy, they'd received the word itself as something of an unknown. Though he'd presumed that from how low their comprehension of the word parallel world was, apparently, it seemed like the idea of a different world wasn't a common one in this world. Coincident with that, Subaru slapped his body to check for any changes. Subaru. Nothing seems to have happened to me. Putting it into words, Subaru ensured that nothing untoward had happened to him. As far as he could tell right now, there were no signs of any abnormalities having occurred. There was neither pain nor numbness. Nor was there a strange voice sadly addressing him with "you violated your instructions," or the people in his surroundings transforming into a flock of cranes, saying, "I did tell you to not to do that." He'd managed to deal with all the worries he'd had without any issues arising. Subaru, this isn't what I expected. Certainly, he'd thought that he hadn't talked about the parallel world due to having some kind of reason, however, nothing really came to his mind, that'd be something that he'd get caught up in, when it came to this. Subaru cocked his head to the side at the sensation of having parried that. Then, Julius raised his hand up and said, "All right. Julius, I now know what the word parallel world means. I can take it as a term you yourself have coined, but there is a part of me that's thinking about its implication. Why do you reference that parallel world so often?" Subaru? Oh, that's right. Just explaining the meaning of the word parallel world isn't much of an explanation. Then in other words. Julius, in other words? Following Julius' questioning, Subaru realized he had cut his explanation short. And, clearing his throat, he went on to say, "Subaru, I come from this parallel world thing. I wasn't born and raised in this world, I'm some alien who got mixed up into this world halfway through. That's why for me this place is a parallel world. Indeed, now he had clearly explained his position and circumstances. I am someone who came to this world from a parallel world. Nice to meet you. Roughly speaking, this is what Subaru had told them. It was easy to imagine Emilia and the others to have been shaken by that bold confession. After all, it must have been a bombshell to them, since they didn't know parallel worlds existed. It really was no surprise that all the common sense they had up till now had been thrown out of whack, along with the shock they felt along with it, like their world had been turned upside down. After finishing his confession, Subaru took note of their concerns and cursed his own heedlessness. If he had made Emilia and Beatrice feel as if they'd been engulfed by a maelstrom of confusion, if he had made them do something like grieve, then he was responsible for having brought that about. How would he comfort such beautiful girls if they were to break down into tears? He had no experience with this. So, with a few seconds passing, feeling these anxieties, he glanced his eyes towards them. Subaru had imagined that he would find them looking pale, blood drained from their visage, with confusion etched on their faces. However, Emilia. So you mean you're from beyond the Great Cascade? Subaru? The Great Cascade? Subaru's eyes widened at Emilia, who had timidly asked this question whilst frowning in no. They were words he hadn't come across before. Cascade, he thought must have been a waterfall or something, but this Great Cascade must be a big version of one. Perhaps he could think of it as a huge waterfall. Actually, no, what sort of connection did this big waterfall have with the parallel world in the first place? Subaru, no, definitely not. Nothing to do with waterfalls. I'm talking about a world that's completely different from this place and what your common knowledge is and stuff. Ram, so, then you're from beyond the Great Waterfall. How do they call it in your hometown, Barusu? Actually no, I guess it's probably the other way around given that it's your hometown. The countries here surrounded by the Great Waterfall would be a parallel world. Your wild behavior makes sense to me now as well. Echidna, that's right. That must be the reason why I couldn't find anything no matter how much I investigated Natsuki-kuen's origins, because he is from beyond the Great Cascade. Subaru, well hey, how are you all so quickly convinced with that? It wasn't just Emilia who had agreed with this conclusion, even Ram and Echidna, who both appeared to be quite intelligent, had agreed with it. For Subaru, their levels of belief towards this mysterious waterfall were nigh incomprehensible. The thought that there was a parallel world beyond a Great Cascade, on the other side of a waterfall, where the heck was this tunneled wonderland? Beatrice, you may have no idea about it considering you've forgotten so much, in fact. But regarding the Great Cascade, it's at the far reaches of the world, and there are a few stories left behind from people coming from beyond it, I suppose. Subaru, I do quite like the sound of that, at the far reaches of the world. Beatrice, the Great Waterfall is said to be impossible to cross over, with the exception of dragons. It's the border between here and there. There's no one who knows what is on the other side of it, so on the rare occasion that someone crosses over from that world, no one holds any basis to deny the words they spoke as lies or falsehoods, I suppose. Beatrice explained it for him, on the basis of the assent of the people listening in, who were showing their acceptance for it. The contents were iffy, there were some things that were difficult to imagine for Subaru with him not being an expert in the circumstances of this world. However, thinking about the term Great Cascade and its present explanation now. Subaru, so this place feels like a floating continent, something like you can't cross over to another continent without a dragon? Ram, ha. Subaru, quit with those horribly disgruntled sighs there. You're gonna hurt my feelings. Ram looked at Subaru, who'd been trying to justify it best as he could, with a sense of staggering disappointment. However, the others also seemed to be regarding Subaru's talk the same way, pretty much. In the end, his floating continent theory was likely incorrect. Subaru, if I'm off base, then I'm off base, I get it. But I was sorta hoping to have a great eureka moment riding on Dragonback, if say my theory now had been correct. Meili, if you keep talking about it like that, Oni-Isan's adorable Earth Dragon is gonna start sulking, isn't she? Subaru, yeah. That black Earth Dragon is mine, right? Let me have a ride on her later. Shala, I'm gonna be his wheel. I'm gonna be sulking too. Master, I think you should take better care of me, and appreciate me better, and love me more. Now that you have lost your memories, let our relationship restart. From Zeruo. Subaru, you're noisy and damn clingy. Also, don't be so quick to poke fun at me losing my memories like you're talking about someone else. Shala noisily joined in the conversation, with Meili sitting clutching her own knees. Though Shala had intruded rather brusquely and said that was something which Subaru now was actually really grateful for. Of course, fretting too much about it was tough. From there, Subaru shifts his attention with a glance towards his surroundings. In his original world, though depending on the situation, Subaru had a reputation for not being able to read the mood from the people in his surroundings. However, no matter how unsuited he was at it, if the emotions were strong enough, then they could be easily read or seen. Not just Emilia and Beatrice, but also Ram, Julius, Anastasia, i.e. Echidna, their expressions were all showing worry towards Subaru. For better or for worse, before losing his memories, Subaru would have been doing pretty well with the ladies. How enviable. How he would like to be told what kind of magic he'd used. Even if they did, he didn't at all believe he could put it into practice now. Subaru, anyways, to sum up everything that's been said, at the edge of this world there's a waterfall called the Great Cascade, and occasionally people come from beyond it. And so you're saying I'm one of them as well. Emilia, from what I've heard from you, I can only assume that's the case. No. Subaru, Subaru exchanged looks with the wondering Emilia, his arms crossed by his side as he painstakingly hummed. To be precise, it was not Subaru's intended course of action to run counter to the general understanding which everyone had of the world. Nonetheless, even if Subaru thought that the parallel world and the Great Cascade were unrelated, he knew that he wouldn't make any progress in this situation if he continued to talk about it. Subaru, to make a long story short, it is. Within this world there was no concept of parallel worlds. He didn't know whether this beyond the Great Cascade, as Emilia and the others recognized it, suggested the existence of another world, or the world Subaru was in. In actuality, there may be other continent-like stuff across from the waterfall, and from there may be records left behind of a figure like Columbus who made it there, taking him as a weirdo. If so, he could safely say that a correct understanding of parallel world for them was already a lost cause. Subaru, by the way, did I never mention anything about the parallel world back when I had my memories? Emilia, thinking back to then, once in a while you'd make some mention the word parallel world, but this is the first time we have really talked properly about it. Beatrice, Betty agrees with Emilia, in fact. The others affirmed the answer to his question with gestures, whereas Emilia and Beatrice with words. The prior Subaru hadn't spoken to them about the parallel world. Perhaps he deemed that they wouldn't make heads or tails out of it if he'd spoken about it like he had now. Or Subaru. I guess because I had been stopping myself from talking about it, huh? Julius, Subaru? Subaru, huh? No, nothing. Hey, if I'm not the only so-called parallel worlder there's been, then do you know anyone else? A person from the other side of the Great Cascade, or Castaway, whichever. Perhaps there were a lot of people drifting in from different worlds, maybe there was a community of sorts where such people gathered. However, Subaru's hopes were denied by a shake of the head from Julius. Julius, sorry, the existence of a castaway, as you call it, is very rare. Most people who claim they are from beyond the Great Cascade are lying. What they say are generally pipe dreams or fabrications. Some of them set their sights on trying to extort people out of money, whereas others are simply trying to influence people of their fanciful beliefs. Subaru, oh, well, yeah, I can see that happening. As much as you would like to believe such stories, the majority were the works of fiction or embellished rumors, given that there was no way to make sure. Once one's imagination/creation was set loose with these dreamy stories or ennui tales, they became a breeding grounds of reverie. Even if people like Subaru, who were genuinely from another world, existed, their existence would be buried under countless falsehoods. Echidna, honestly, my interest in the Great Cascade is never-ending, but it seems it really has no relevance to our current situation. It would be a good idea to simply end this with establishing that Natsuki-kun's unknown hometown, and the knowledge he has, have been settled. Echidna had broken what had been an awkward silence that had been forming. Originally she had been the one asking Subaru about it. Although there were still parts unfamiliar to her, and she was most likely unsatisfied, Subaru welcomed her ending the conversation there. Besides, the more he talked about his original world, the more he would have to face the problems that he had left behind. That made his heart heavy and ache. By concentrating on the situation in front of him, he could try and distract himself from these feelings. Subaru, that's it about me. I understand that you all care about me and love me, but I feel like we aren't going to make any progress talking about this leisurely. Why, first things first. He didn't know what had directly caused his memory loss. But the place where the Subaru with his memories intact had supposedly last ventured, he wanted to check what had happened there. Beatrice, you will want to check the Teijida library, I suppose. Subaru nodded at Beatrice, who had beaten him to voicing out his thoughts out loud. So, with all that said and done, the group headed out towards the Teijida library. Subaru was feeling quite nervous about what would be awaiting him there, the way there wasn't free of its troubles though. That was because... Subaru, Emilia-chan, why are you holding my hand so tightly? Emilia? Well, it's because I'm worried about leaving you by yourself, Subaru. I need to keep you in arm's reach. So, I came to conclusion, given that it'd be good to hold hands from the get-go. Subaru, I like the simple, quick nature of that conclusion, but like this, it's way more embarrassing. Subaru lifted up his hand that was being held by Amelia, aware that his cheeks were getting flushed. Her slender, cute fingers were gently holding his hand, and he worried about whether his palms were sweating. In reply to Subaru's words, Amelia raised her eyebrows in a huff and said, "Geez. Amelia, don't be like that. Beatrice is also holding your hand, so it's not just us two together." Subaru, there's a difference between holding the hands of a child, compared to one of a beautiful woman. There's a big difference between them, like that when cold rain is falling again on this day too, or the difference between the heavens and earth or night and day. Amelia, I'm sorry, I don't really get what you're saying. Amelia spared Subaru no quarters, what with him having a record for losing his memories as a result of being left to his own devices, even with all the excuses he was spouting out. God damned you, memories. And me for having lost them. Beatrice, now, that statement is unpardonable. But, it's as Amelia says. Subaru ought to follow along obediently, and be well cared for by Betty and Amelia, I suppose. Subaru, oh yeah? This is where we put Beatrice in the middle, and I and Amelia hold hands with you from both sides, young couple style. I'd be down for that, but wouldn't that not be uncool? Beatrice, Subaru isn't Subaru unless he's uncool, in fact. Subaru, what kind of assessment is that? He ended up taking that scathing evaluation right to him from Beatrice as well, who was holding his other hand. Julius, who was leading the way ahead, looked back towards Subaru a few times, and Echidna, who had been following right behind him, would explain to them, one by one, what lay around each corner. Ram was sharp-tongued whenever she spoke out, however, Subaru was the only one who knew that despite her outward appearance she was suffering inside. He wondered if he should talk to someone about her, but he doesn't know who he could possibly talk to regarding what she was experiencing. In a way, it was only Shala and Meili, who were chatting together with each other at the back of the group, who were mentally soothing for Subaru right now. Subaru, well, they're not really going to be useful for anything. Meili. Somehow I don't think you are being polite right now, Oni-san. Shala, Master's mind is always like that. It would be a waste to dwell on it. You'd be shocked if you all peeked inside, it's all pink anyways, makes me want to pull away. Pink Brain, shameless school. TN, Shala is making a reference to https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/herenchi_gakuin. As for what she means by this reference, no clue, since I haven't watched it. Subaru, doubt we'd find either shame or schooling in you. Shala, Master's doing my entire knowledge, Master's doing. Mere conversation with her made his head ache. Whilst they had been exchanging these bouts of conversation, the party had gone up the stairs and arrived at the Teijida library on the 3rd floor. It was quite expansive, almost as if it transcended time and space. Subaru, so this place is Teijida. There are quite a lot of books in here, just as I'd heard. Subaru breathed in awe as he looked around the Teijida library, marveling at the sheer number of books there. Indeed, this was a sight that was beyond anyone's imagination. Subaru was quite the avid reader, reading light novels, manga, strategy guides, etc., but he had never been surrounded by so many books. Naturally, compared to the National Diet Library or something, those would probably win out. However, they would only gain that due to the difference in space there was. Either way, the meaning behind the picturesque scenery in front of him wasn't just down to the sheer amount of stuff there. Subaru, if the books of the dead are here, then wouldn't that mean that there are as many books here as people who have died? If it has been recording non-stop since the time of the Homo sapiens, then there literally must be an overwhelming amount of records here. Subaru didn't know the scale of this world, but if the records of the dead were books, then the quantity of books would be immeasurable. Even if he tried to find a book, such as one with the name of a deceased person he knew, he would not be able to physically find it. Subaru, in a modern-day library, a lookup function is indispensable, but here? Beatrice, I don't know what you mean by lookup function or whatever, I suppose. However, there is no one else more similar to a librarian here than Betty. Got no choice but to start checking, I suppose. Subaru, this is like looking for a 100 yen coin in the middle of a desert. Warily, Subaru placed his hand on the spine of a book. Pulling the tome from the bookshelf, it easily fit into his hand, and he didn't feel like it was anything special when he looked at it. It was just a plain old book. There was no design to it on the cover, other than its title. In all, it could be mundanely described as being a very plain book. When it came to the issues he had with it. Subaru, damn it. I can't read the title. The title was written in illegible squiggly characters. From what he had heard from Amelia and the others, the title of the book was meant to be the name of someone who had died. If the dead was someone you shared some connection with, then apparently you could read over their memories in life. However, Subaru could not even comprehend what the letters meant in the first place. With his memories now at jeopardy, he doubted that having such connection would even make sense. Subaru, well, this may be difficult. Amelia, Subaru. Subaru, who had been lost in thought, looked around in surprise at hearing Amelia's abrupt shout. In an instant, the book he had picked up was wrenched from his grasp by Amelia. She stepped back from him, holding the book to her chest. Subaru, huh, Amelia-chan. Amelia, don't be so careless. Subaru, do you understand? You must have lost your memories here, you get that right? Subaru, no, wow, that's overblowing it. Amelia said that as her complexion changed, to that Subaru gave a scratch of his cheek, accompanied by a strained smile. However, it seemed that only Subaru was taking the situation lightly. Beatrice, Subaru, listen to Amelia, refrain yourself from acting so impulsively, I suppose. Julius, I agree. You should be careful and refrain yourself from performing such a rash action. Subaru, MH. Both Beatrice and Julius had beseeched caution from Subaru. His throat had seized up, unable to reply to either of them. It wasn't animosity that welled up in his heart, but rather shame from his awkwardness. Certainly he may have been acting a little too carelessly. Shala puffed. Master is getting angry. You look so sad. But, I don't mind even if Master's acting like a pitiable naughty kid. Subaru, shut up. Don't poke fun at people who are reflecting on themselves. Echidna, alright already. It'd be a bother to be interrupted like that again. In truth, Natsuki-kun's actions were a little rash, but we've also already established that. With her hand covering her mouth, Shala was laughing away at Subaru's mistake. Echidna had forced herself between Subaru and Shala as the former snapped at the latter. Then, whilst gently stroking her scarf, she said, Echidna, Natsuki-kun, you were unable to read the title of the book, is that right? Subaru. Oh yeah, that's right. Echidna, what you can see here is that losing your memory as he has will interfere with your cognitive abilities such as your literacy skills. That is why he was speaking of parallel worlds. Beatrice, sorry, but Subaru began to study the alphabet when he arrived at Roswell's mansion. Echidna. Echidna, who had tried to speak confidently about it, was left dumbfounded by Beatrice's retort. Not paying any regard to Echidna's lack of response, Beatrice crossed her small arms. Beatrice, Subaru could not read or write the I alphabet until he came to the mansion, I suppose. The elder sister of the two sisters, who served as his instructor, should know about that too, in fact. Ram, yes, it is exactly as Beatrice-sama says. From the start, Barusa couldn't read or write, so I dedicated myself to teach him. It seems my efforts were wasted, seeing him in this current state. Subaru, sorry. I wasn't aware there was such an episode. Subaru raised his voice in apology in reply to Ram's resentful complaint. Taking a sidelong glance at the occurring exchange, Echidna cleared her throat. Echidna, ahem, it seems I was way off the mark. You can forget what I said. Julius, no, it's not as off the mark as you may think. At least we have discovered that Subaru's memories were lost after coming to Lugnica. Ram, in other words, Barusu is just useless baggage that doesn't serve any purpose in this library. Ram scathingly added to Julius' confirmation. Subaru remained silent as he didn't want to stir up any more trouble upon himself. However, it was Julius who spoke with a short nod, saying Miss Ram's words are correct. Julius, her manner of saying it aside, that's how it is. In any case, we can't let Subaru relive what happened the night before. We should be the ones to look for clues in here. Echidna, yes, that would be safer. Ram, I don't have any objections. Are Amelia-sama and Beatrice-sama okay with it? Beatrice nodded back towards Ram, saying, I understand, I suppose. Amelia turned towards Subaru, looking at him with quite a serious expression in her eyes. Amelia, Subaru, please wait here without doing anything rash. The memories you lost, me and the others, we will find them. Subaru, oh okay, understood. It feels annoying not being able to do anything, but I believe in Amelia-chan and everyone else. I will wait here quietly. Amelia, can you really wait here quietly? You won't wander off as you please? Subaru, I don't need reminding. I'll be fine. I am not a 5-year-old kid, I can wait here quietly, I can promise it if you want. Amelia, so maybe you're not going to be quiet after all. Subaru, what do you mean? Granted, he had brought out that promise to make her feel peace of mind, however it had ended up in only sowing more mistrust. Looking around his surroundings, he saw that, Julius and Echidna aside, Beatrice and Ram were merely shrugging their shoulders in reply as if to say that's how it is. In any case. Amelia, Subaru is going to quietly wait here at the front, okay? In response to Amelia's sincere appeal, Subaru decided that he would reluctantly wait for them at the front of the library. He sat down hugging his knees watching over the party, who had begun to split into 2 separate groups to search the library. In one group were Amelia, Beatrice and Ram. In the other there was Julius and Echidna. Looking on with an air of confusion, it seemed that Emilia and Echidna respectively were leading these uneven teams. Meili, teaming up to search must be sorta like insurance, so they don't end up like Oni-san. After all, Oni-san's strong point is that he attracts trouble. Subaru, I may have no memories. Having no memories is an issue, so obviously I cannot even answer back to that. No, I don't want an assassin of all people to tell me this. Meili, because I am totally concerned about trifling matters like that. Subaru, I don't think you can call that a trifling matter. In the first place. She had clicked her tongue at Subaru, interrupting his train of thought. He turned to face her. The voice had come from far away from the bookshelves, next to the wall which Subaru had been standing at. Meili was standing there with a coquettish expression on her face not at all appropriate for her age. Her braided hair was arranged so that it dangled down to her shoulders. What? She asked him, cocking her head to one side. Subaru, I thought you had joined the search, are you not going to? Meili, yeah, I won't join it, after all, I am not really a proper companion of Oni-san and Wani-san's friends. Subaru, not really a proper companion. Meili, I told you so, didn't I? I'm an assassin, well, as I failed my mission it's more like former assassin. Originally, I was sent here just to help out, not bothered about anything more. Subaru, in other words, I get the feeling like this was your bail condition. Whether a former one or whatever, 'tis quite the drastic decision to take to adventure along with an assassin among your compatriots. Meili, yeah, that's exactly right. I suppose there really is something wrong with them. Meili giggled and placed her hand on her mouth as she said this. Subaru snorted at her attitude and... Subaru, I get why Meili wouldn't go with them, what about you? Shala, have me. I cannot read and write anything, so I am of no use whatsoever. I'm with Master, so the book's contents are all gibberish to Yoas. Shala was leaning against the wall, on the opposite side from Meili, laughing as she responded. She proceeded to move over and pulled Subaru by his left arm towards her voluptuous body. Such a soft, warm feeling, instinctively, he untangled himself from her. Subaru, Yuoa. Shala, wah, Master is such a meanie. Subaru, I'm not a meanie, stop that. It's improper for a girl to have done that, such things should be reserved only for the guy you like. No, don't do that because even a guy you like would be turned off if you came at him like that so abruptly. You're doing yourself absolutely no good by behaving like this. Shala, puffed, talking about a girl's sense of dignity again? Master seriously never changes. Shala pouted at Subaru as she protested against his attitude. However, hearing her words had made Subaru look down in embarrassment. Shala, Master? Subaru, you think I haven't changed as well? Subaru blurted this out to Shala almost instinctively. He had heard this phrase several times over the course of the few hours he had been awake. It had seemed like a salvation to him to hear this, but also at the same time a curse. He could be pleased that he had not changed, or he could lament that he had not changed. Shala, I'm not so sure. Nevertheless, despite such turmoil brewing inside Subaru, Shala had said that so readily. He was, as expected, astonished at her reply. Perhaps it had been a mistake to have let her hear some of his more delicate worries. Subaru, you. No, it was idiotic of me to have asked you that. Shala, godash. Master is not an idiot. When you say it like that, I'm gonna get angry, Master or not. My master is a wonderful person. I want you to be confident in yourself. Subaru, I really don't understand your position in all of this. She would point and laugh at a depressed Subaru, and then get angry when Subaru mocked himself. The only thing that stayed consistent was the topic related to him. Hearing Subaru's question, Shala pushed her ample-sized chest forward and smiled with her hands on her hips. Shala, whether you're changed or not, Master is still Master, so I don't really give a toss. So long as you do as you please, Master, I will always follow you. Subaru, even if it results in crazy stuff? Shala, well. Even if we end up in strange situations, I can always pry things open by force. Master may have forgotten, but that is the relationship between Master and me. Subaru. All of her candid words, everything Shala had said, showing nary a trace of duplicity, or anything like that, struck him they had, many times over, causing Subaru to give a faint gulp. He turned his face away, so that Shala wouldn't be able to see it. Meili, Oni-san? Subaru. Seeing Meili looking at him there, he turned his face away back to the opposite side again. Shala, Master, what's wrong? Subaru, geez. Subaru couldn't escape to the left of him, or to the right. He could only kneel down, and look down at the floor holding his head in his arms so nobody would see his face now. Subaru got the sensation that Meili and Shala were looking at each other with him curled up in between them. They wouldn't understand. No, he doesn't want them to understand. He felt like he'd been saved by those vapid, vacuous, gap-filled words. He felt like "you needn't get worked up" showed through more eloquently in her attitude than in her words. Meili, Oni-san, you're strange. Shala, Master was strange from the very beginning, but I love him for that too. Subaru had nothing he could say in response to the exchange of those girls, that went way over what he could comprehend. He merely felt like the feelings of tension rushing through his mind had eased off, if only a tad. It was a few minutes before Amelia and the others came back sans results that Subaru somehow warded off his impulses and stood up. Chapter 37, A Papier-Mâché Dream. The search of the third-floor library, Teijida had ended with absolutely no results. Amelia, I am so sorry. We tried really hard to look for clues. Amelia bowed her head in apology toward Subaru after bringing him those fruitless results. Subaru politely accepted the apology, but in all honesty, he wasn't that disappointed. Of course, it certainly would have been for the best if he could have regained his memories here. Nevertheless, he was lacking in awareness in having lost his memories in the first place, so Subaru did not feel overly emotional that the search party had yielded unsuccessful results. Shala. Master, what's up? Subaru, oh, it's nothing. Shala glanced towards Subaru, cocking her head at him with a happy-go-lucky expression on her face. Subaru shrugged his shoulders, feeling a bit uneasy at the sight of her and her long, jet-black braided hair swinging about. There was no ill will, malice, or even any profound meaning to her. In the end, it meant she wasn't really thinking about anything, but her attitude being like this appeared as a relief to Subaru right now. At least it was better than seeing the others always looking at him like he's always done something, constantly worrying over him, and watching over every single step of his. Julius, apparently, there doesn't seem to be a pattern to how the books are arranged. It would have been too much to ask to have found them lined up ordered by their titles, or in chronological order. And on the flip side, books which we would have found yesterday on one bookshelf cannot be found today on the same one. Subaru, so yet another troublesome and unfriendly library, huh? Subaru wrinkled his nose at Julius' remarks. Not only did the library boast an overwhelming collection of books, but the books happened to move around scrambling themselves on their own accord, giving him absolutely no hope as a library user. Even if there happened to be the book they needed, they would never find it. Subaru, why can't we just pull out each book one by one and stack them onto the floor? There ain't no end bookshelf at the back, since the bookshelves all go around the room in a circle, but say we pick a starting point and go through them one by one, surely we'll find something somewhere? Echidna, in my opinion, it'd be wiser to not. Probably doing that would be prohibited by the tower's rules. It would probably be considered as disrespecting the library. Echidna, cocking her head to the side, dismissed Subaru's suggestion. Beatrice crossed her arms and agreed with Echidna with a curt "I suppose." Beatrice, Betty being an experienced librarian could never overlook leaving a book on the floor. You cannot show such disrespect to books like that, I suppose. Ram, Beatrice-sama, I feel like you often left a large amount of books stacked up on the floor. Beatrice, those were the ones that instructed me how to correctly arrange the library in fact. Ram narrowed her pale crimson eyes at Beatrice's awkward excuse, though she didn't bother to reply back to her. She merely let out a deep sigh, to which Beatrice's expression turned to one of shock. Alongside this librarian talk, Subaru butted in and said, "Prohibited," with a puzzled expression on his face. Subaru, I am sorry, it looks like this is something I've not heard of again. What is prohibited? Amelia, oh, I am sorry, it looks like I didn't explain it properly. Amelia raises one of her fingers in answer to Subaru. Amelia, in actual fact, there's a bunch of rules that we can't break in the tower. Such as, don't leave this tower until we finish its trials, don't do anything bad to the library, don't damage the tower, those kinds of rules. Subaru, I see. Who would have guessed that putting books on the floor in this library was a bad thing? By the way, who judges whether we've broken any rules? Shala, oh, that's where I come in. Me, the Stars Keeper, shall. Meaning, if a rule violation happens, I'll kinda end up freaking out and I'll become a cold-blooded killing machine. That's why I'd prefer if you did your best not to. Subaru, you. A cold-blooded killing machine. Subaru could only laugh dubiously at Shala, who'd cheerfully lifted her hands up whilst making this proclamation. No matter how much you believed Shala's frivolous speech, he thought it unlikely that she could ever transform into a cold-blooded killing machine. In the first place, how much damage could she really do with the slender arms of a woman? Even that should not apply in a magical fantasy world. In fact, Subaru had heard that Shala was not his or Amelia's ally, but rather was the Stars Keeper warden of this Pleiades watchtower. She held a different position compared to how Meili had found herself here. Supposedly, she was here to aid in advancing the trials inside this tower. Yet he had no such impression of her actually doing this. Subaru, if you seriously hold such an important position, you're going to have to let us off the hook for the sake of our friendship. Shala, oh, you are such a bad guy. Master is quite dirty. But I can't get enough of that slightly wicked side of yours. There's tons and tons of stuff I'd like to hear from you, were it one of your wishes, Master, but that is irrelevant to my will. Give up on that hope and show good sportsmanship, act fair and square and give it your all. Subaru, you're no use. Shala, HN-. His strategy of trying to bring her to his side ended with unexpected failure, as her supervisory authority wasn't enough. At the same time, he had to keep Shala's forehead away with his finger, as she kept trying to bring her face close to his in the middle of the conversation, forcing her charming face back. And while doing that, Subaru let out a feeble sigh. Emilia, it really kinda seems like Subaru and Shala are both really good friends. Emilia whispered this just after Subaru had finished talking with Shala. Hearing Emilia whisper it to him, Subaru turned to face her and awkwardly stammered a no, that isn't so to her. Emilia. His attempt to lighten the mood of the situation was not working. Subaru immediately stopped when he saw Emilia's expression, her eyes downcast. Emilia was not smiling. Merely, her eyes, framed by her long lashes, were cast down, and wavering within her amethyst eyes, was a seeming sense of loneliness. Subaru's face sunk at seeing her expression. Immediately noticing his reaction, Emilia frantically waved her hands back and forth at him in denial. Emilia, oh no, it's really good that you're both friends. Such a gloomy face does not suit you, Subaru, yeah, it's okay. Feigning a smile, Emilia somehow blurted those words out to herself. Subaru, Emilia-chan, you know, I. Subaru holds his head as he struggled to find anything he could say to Emilia. He felt like he would be saying the wrong thing no matter what he said. Likely the only way he could find a correct answer would be amidst his vanished memories. He was in a nightmarish situation where all the options that were presented were probably false answers. Under these circumstances, saying anything to the sad girl sitting in front of him would be. Hey, so what are we going to do now? A soft voice broke the awkward silence. It had been Meili who had asked this from where she sat on Teijida's floor, resting her chin in her hands. She looked up at the adults in the room from her seated position and spoke. Meili, we can't find any leads to recovering Oni-san's memories here. It's a shame, not that I particularly care, but I wonder what we should do next. Are we still trying to find clues on how he lost his memory? Or... Meili cut her words off there, instead turns her face upwards and pointed at the ceiling with her right hand, smiling quite provocatively. Meili, let's go upstairs? Let's postpone finding Oni-san's memory for a short while. Echidna, yes, that seems like something to consider as well. Having heard Meili's suggestion, it was Echidna who had responded with a thoughtful look on her face. Emilia's eyes widened at hearing her agreement. Emilia, wait. I feel the same sense of wanting to hasten, but I can't leave Subaru like he is. Echidna, I understand your view. It would be certainly preferable for me, Julius, and everyone to return Natsuki-kun's memory. However, we can't ignore the current situation either. Natsuki-kun's memories ceasing to exist may be linked to the tower's trial. Emilia, Subaru's memories are linked to the trial? It wasn't just Emilia who had reacted like this, the others had all turned their heads in surprise towards Echidna as she said this. Realizing she had the attention of everyone, Echidna closed one of her eyes and said, May I? Echidna, there is no doubt that common sense barely applies when it comes to this tower. However, it would be foolish to think what happened to Natsuki-kun is unrelated to the tower. That's why we all went to Teijida in the first place. To put it broadly, we're thinking that his memories were taken from him by the tower. Subaru, I think that sounds too uni and cool, that memories can be stolen by the tower. If it wasn't me who was experiencing this, I would be excited to hear more of the story, but to begin with, Teijida's trial is complete. Isn't it strange to try and pull out my memories from here? Echidna, yeah. Therefore I think that your memories weren't stolen because of the trial, but rather because you must have broken one of the rules. Even if the trial of Teijida is over, the functions of the entire tower haven't been carried out. It's just like taking out a book or disrespecting the library. Echidna had explained her reasoning and Subaru was left to puzzle it over in his mind. In conclusion, Echidna's reasoning alluded to this. Subaru, so you're saying yesterday I must have broken one of the rules of this place and bam, my head went kerplow. To be honest, trying to search for loopholes sounds like something I would do. I am not able to make any objection to her reasoning. Emilia, but wouldn't that have made Shala angry? Echidna had nodded at Subaru acknowledging his conclusion. However, Emilia had butted in and pointed towards Shala, clearly remembering their previous interaction. Emilia, if he had violated any rules, won't that have made Shala angry? It should be a completely different story to what we are experiencing here with his memories. Ram, that's right. I understand the possibility that Barusa foolishly broke the rules, but Shala has not bared her fangs yet at Ram or any of you. What do you make of that? Ram glares at Shala with her pale, red eyes. Beholding her gaze, Shala leapt up with an eep and hid behind Subaru. Ram, no way would you have seriously abandoned your role because of Borosu? Julius, that is very optimistic of you to say for sure. However, as Miss Shala said some time ago, she's barely aware of her being the one who actually carries out the punishments in the tower. Shrugging his shoulders, Julius stands next to Echidna and supports her opinion. Julius, if we are presented with the 4 things which are prohibited, and you break one, the given penalty may not be equal for us. Miss Shala could turn into our enemy and in some cases attack us, for example desecrating the library in some way could result in having your memories stolen. Julius cut his words off there and promptly turned his yellow eyes toward Subaru. Subaru. There were some really complex emotions swimming inside Julius' eyes which Subaru could not distinguish. Julius continued his speech with, although. Julius, we do not have any time or actual proof to test whether this guess is correct. Ram, there is a way to check. If it's truly just losing your memories, then we can just sacrifice the 4 or 5 hours of memory that Borosu has had since he's been awake. That ensures that the damage will be minimal. Subaru, stop using people's memories as guinea pigs. Memories still shape that person. Even if it's only 4 or 5 hours, I am still myself. I'm not a bad Natsuki Subaru. Ram, I was joking. Subaru's entire body shivered at Ram's blunt remark which she had said behind his back. Whether it had been a joke or not, Subaru had no clue. It was likely it was, dare he say that her lofty attitude was probably just a facade. It is in her nature that she does not want to show any weakness to people, after all could it be related to what had happened a short while ago? In the end, it wouldn't surprise him if she just wished to erase her embarrassment from the time when Subaru had seen her frail side. Anyways, other than whether Echidna and Julius' reasoning are correct or not, one possibility was worth considering. Regarding his memory loss that. Subaru, to put things plainly, both of your opinions, regardless of whether they have a nugget of truth within it, maybe we're all grasping at straws here, in that I am against. Even if we're like sorta just floundering around, I don't really get the feeling that the memories I lost are gonna be found, you know. Amelia, does what you're thinking have any basis at all? Subaru, just a hunch. Besides, if this is really part of the tower's trial then maybe if we clear him I'll get my memories back, right? Amelia. Subaru wagged his finger left and right as Amelia and the others exchanged looks in response to his words. However, they hadn't reacted negatively to his thoughts. Rather, there was a trace of hope beginning to appear on their faces. Firmly placing her palm on her chest, Amelia began to rapidly nod. Amelia, yes, that's right. If Subaru's memory has been slurped up by the tower, then surely they may be returned after completing its trial. Subaru, the expression you used, being sucked up, I get quite the super cute feeling from it, but that's the spirit, that's the spirit. Amelia, that's the spirit. Subaru smiled in relief at Amelia as she had jumped up and made a cute triumphant pose. Beatrice, who had been looking on, shook her head in exasperation. Beatrice, geez. I really don't understand which one of you is the one being encouraged, in fact. So she let that out like that. Certainly, with this, their positions were opposites, however, Subaru thought that was fine. After all, he had found some hope in this situation, and some of the vigor had returned to Amelia's eyes. For that, Subaru had felt quite a great sense of relief. Such a gloomy face did not suit a young lady like her. Besides, she had been worrying about Subaru from the depths of her heart. 'Twas quite painful to think that he'd been the reason behind making her look so gloomy. Subaru, and I was the one who showed such a move on a woman way out of my league. Beatrice, I have no idea what he is saying, for now we will adjourn finding Subaru's memory, I suppose. So if we are to complete the tower's trial, we should do as Meili suggested and go upstairs. Subaru, upstairs. So you said we are on the 3rd floor now, so the next floor up is the 2nd. As he said that, Subaru looked around the library. A room that he'd surveyed more than plenty, even when he hadn't actually walked around it. A room with nothing in it except bookshelves. Meaning there were no stairs that led up. Subaru, where is the staircase that leads to the 2nd floor? Julius, it's located on the 4th floor, there's a staircase there that leads up to the 2nd floor from there. Amelia sneaked a look towards Julius with a concerned look on her face. Seeing her, Julius knitted his eyebrows and said, worry not. Julius, I will not act rashly without consulting any of you like yesterday. It is as I promised at breakfast. However, even if I hadn't. Ram, Reed, the first sword saint, is a very tough opponent. Now then, what do you suppose we should do? Julius and Ram exchanged bitter looks. It wasn't just those two that seemed to share this feeling, but everyone around him had a similar look on their faces. That is, other than Shala, who had grimaced like she'd put something in her mouth that wasn't just bitter, but poisonous. Subaru, sorry. What do you mean, Reed? As usual, it was not Suki Subaru that had been left behind in this situation. The first sword saint, Reed Estrella. That was the name of the man who guarded the second floor of the Pleiades watchtower as its examiner. In the first place, the title of sword saint was something Subaru had heard for his first time. However, when he had heard that he was of the first generation of this lineage, he got the premonition that this man could be likened to a powerful fictional character from his knowledge of these subcultures. His prediction was quite accurate. In fact, these sword saints or whatever were extremely powerful people, and such. It seemed that yesterday, the party that had challenged Reed had experienced the difference in strength between them, rather like the difference between an adult and a child. Amongst them, it was only Amelia who had achieved some sort of victory through both skill and luck. Subaru, the problem is that I've lost my memory and I can't even do anything useful. At the breakfast table where everyone had been trying to distract themselves from their uneasiness, he had tried to think of a novel idea to clear the tower with a bang. As far as he knew, the trial on the second floor seemed to require pure strength. In this situation, there was no place at all for his guile or knowledge of the modern world. Subaru, I guess scattering some flour about and attacking him with a dust explosion or something like that ain't gonna cut it. His strongest signature ability, dust explosion, he would need to fine-tune quite a large amount of flour to activate it. In the first place, Subaru imagined there wouldn't be an abundant amount of flour lying around in this place where food was scarce. In fact, it was unknown to him whether there was any flour at all here. Subaru, then I hope I can activate the secret cheat ability that I must have gotten from being summoned into this world. Subaru punched the wall next to him with his palm, yelling out a HA, in an attempt to see if he could activate it. There was no shockwave emitted from his palm, nor had the stone wall he had punched shattered into little pieces. The only thing he felt was the roughness against his palm, and a somewhat hollow pang in his heart. Unfortunately, the secret cheat ability that had been given to Subaru seemed to not be related to great physical strength. In a last attempt, Subaru places his hands on the wall and kicks it with all his might. All that resulted was that he left a footprint on the place he had kicked the wall, as well as a stubbed toe. Subaru, well, it must be magic. Beatrice, tell me how to use some magic. Beatrice, magic. Subaru can never use that ever again. Subaru, ever again. Why? Did I dabble into a forbidden spell or something? Beatrice, you used too much beginner's magic despite being told not to use it, and it broke your gate, I suppose. That's why you will never be able to use magic again, in fact. Subaru, it broke from using beginner's magic. So lame. Subaru had the urge to cry out to the heavens, having heard that he indeed had possessed magical powers, but could not use them anymore to live life as a mage, and worst of all, it had been in casting beginner's magic that had destroyed his magical gate. Regardless of his loss of memories, Natsuki Subaru's life in a different world had started from the very bottom. Subaru, guess at least my saving grace is that I've been blessed with people. Clenching his hand into a fist, and then unclenching it, Subaru felt these emotions along with a profound sigh. Even if it was rather one-sided, it was relieving that there were people here who knew him. Without them, he would have been alone in this unknown world without any special abilities. To be honest, he did not think he was skillful enough to survive without any support. So, finding himself here was a salvation, even if it had made someone's face sink. Subaru. Gulping, Subaru bent and stretched on the spot. He had checked the condition of his body, of his magic, and whether he had any special abilities. They were in some impromptu free time before they went up to the second floor. Whilst Emilia and the others were making the arrangements to challenge the walls of the second floor, Subaru was busying himself in checking whether his body had been endowed with any special abilities. After punching and kicking the wall, after being indignant about being told that his magical ability had ran dry, after running around the tower's insides, after thinking on how to test for special powers from various directions, Subaru had realized one thing, and that was Subaru, that maybe I haven't received anything. After sprinting through the hallway, whilst slightly out of breath, Subaru had accepted this fact. He felt like he possessed more physical strength than he did before. Even when he kicked the wall, he felt as if he was far more agile than he remembered. However, it was not to be confused for special powers, rather it would be more accurate to say that it's the same consequence of the scars on his body, and his grotesque-looking arm. That is to say, it was probably due to what had happened during the year which Subaru could not remember. The only ability he possessed was the one where he was just an ordinary person who could not even respond to his parents' expectations. An ability on the levels that an ordinary person would have attained after suitable amount of endeavor. He couldn't feel the grace of special abilities granted to him by a so-called god there. Subaru, at first, I tried to do some transformation poses. He had tried Super Senshi poses, then Kamen Rider poses, Pretty Cure poses, and even Sailor Senshi poses, but they had all been ineffective. Meaning that, in the end, he was a parallel world visitor who'd been thrown in here with nary a thing. Subaru, after all of that, my only hope is that my powers awaken when I am in trouble, fuck. Scratching his head, Subaru bit down the seed of anxiety that was starting to grow in his heart. In front of Amelia and the others, he would have steeled himself and pretended that everything was okay. However, when looking at the situation anew, there was nothing but anxiety regarding Subaru's position. His memory was gone. There was no longer any doubt about it. There was too much evidence pointing towards it. And to be honest, he really wanted to believe it. He couldn't not believe it and continue to stay in this place. He wanted to stay here. Here in this world, only here right now. So, he wanted some powers to do that. Subaru, in the end, I have to depend on the bonds I have made with the people I don't remember. Makes me want to cry. Natsuki Subaru, who was always mooching off stuff, did not have any changes to him, even in this parallel world. The more Amelia and the others showed how earnestly they were worried about Subaru, the more Subaru cursed himself for being blessed with his borrowed position. Subaru, it's not like when I go to the second floor I'ma be able to do anything there. That was why, in his heart, he had refused to be left behind. After they had explained to him about the guardian of the second floor, Rita, they had argued whether to bring Subaru along to the trial. It had been Amelia who was the most concerned about bringing him along. Others were a bit reluctant but had not protested as strongly as Amelia. Subaru on the other hand wished to accompany them. It seemed that they had thought that he would be unlikely to be of much help to them in conquering the second floor. They also mentioned that Rita's temperament would be harmful towards him. Therefore, although if it had kept like that, Subaru was going to be left behind, he had. Subaru, still, I had insisted on going with them. The reason why they had tried to leave Subaru behind was because they were worried about him. Being treated so gently with concern always on their mind felt delightfully poisonous to him. If he had been the Natsuki Subaru with his memories intact, he was sure that he would have accompanied them, and that there would never have been such a discussion on whether he was coming or not. It would be unlikely that his amnesia would influence his abilities. In other words, except for the lack of knowledge, Subaru had thought he would be able to fight just like before he had lost his memories. Hence, he had tried one way or another to prove it to them, but in the end he hadn't gotten any results. Subaru, although I asked Beatrice to leave me alone, from here on out the going's going to get tough. In seeing that Subaru was about to be left behind, he recalls Beatrice's sullen face. However, he had still asked her to leave him be after he had tried to ascertain whether his secret cheat ability was something physical, magical, or skill-based. After she had left, Subaru had tried out the transformation poses. After all, it would have been extremely embarrassing to test these poses in front of another person. Beatrice of course had been quite unyielding and Subaru recalled how he had argued back and forth with her. Beatrice, when I leave you alone, you're gonna end up losing your memories, nothing good will come of it. Betty will not move from here even with a lever, I suppose. Subaru, I am glad you feel that way, I'm totally grateful, but I'm about to do some stuff that I can't show to anyone. Beatrice, between Betty and Subaru, we don't need such distance. Subaru, no, I will be getting naked to put on my makeup by the moonlight. He had tried to break through to her with a brute force approach, zealously appealing her to leave the room. Eventually, seeing how nothing was working, they had managed to sort out things, with Beatrice receiving his strong appeal that he wouldn't do anything unnecessary, and would without fail join back up with her. Subaru, although it doesn't ring a bell, I was told I was her contractor. On that point, it seemed like it was going well with Beatrice. Doesn't sound like me, was that actually really me? Grimacing a little, Subaru pulled out the whip that had been holstered at his waist. He tried to hit the tip of it against the wall, but instead only succeeded in hitting his own leg. Subaru, ow. I guess my body doesn't remember how to use it, or maybe I didn't master how to use it before I lost my memory. Having hit his own shin, Subaru's eyes began to tear up in pain as he rubbed it. In the first place, why had he chosen a whip as his weapon of choice? It was not a sword, or a gun. Was he trying to be cool and unique picking a whip as his weapon? Subaru, if I'd been able to use it, then I guess it must mean that it's not just the stuff inside of my head that's gone missing? While rubbing his shin, Subaru mulled this over as he knelt, his face twisting into a scowl at the chance that it really would not be salvageable. If his current reasoning was indeed correct, what was left for him here? He had lost his memories, made those he was supposed to accompany worry, lost everything he had worked towards, and became useless. Ultimately, with only history having been etched onto his body, and merely the outer shell was set in place. Guess he was just like Papier-Mâché. Subaru, ha. With a short sigh, Subaru got up. Those words that were floating in his brain were so silly that he wanted to guffaw at them. What are you going to do now, you Papier-Mâché? When wasn't Natsuki Subaru a Papier-Mâché? Subaru, I give up. I'm an idiot. Maybe I'm just unmotivating myself. Subaru brought his fist to his forehead in frustration and sighed again, bending over to pick up the fallen whip. He did not understand how to put it back to how it was. Struggling a bit, he finally managed to somehow put it back on his waist. As he did so, there he saw a blister on the palm of his hand, one that was different from those he got from swinging a kendo sword, one that made him feel the year that had gone by. For some reason, he traced it with his tongue. It felt tough. It felt bitter. Subaru, I wish I'd kept a diary for this occasion. This is no use. Subaru started to walk away from the scene, fuming at his past self in irrational anger. He couldn't confirm the presence of any secret cheat abilities, but in a sense he could say the fact he couldn't was a trove of information. With this in mind, he concluded that he shouldn't rely on something that did not exist. In a way it was a little bit positive, but way more of a negative. Subaru, well, this is not the right way. Subaru had gone the wrong way, and found himself on another floor. In front of him was the large spiral staircase that leads to the lower floors of the tower. He had heard that the tower was made up of 6 floors. To go up from the 6th floor to the 4th floor, one would have to climb up the stairs, which went up for probably over hundreds of meters high. Subaru, thinking about it, the way this tower is structured is peculiar. It's like being in a fantasy world story now. It was a world where foliage can treat your injuries just by being within. Besides, in his original world, there had been some buildings which had seemed to be beyond human understanding. Pyramids were one example of such a phenomenon. If you think about it, then maybe there was not much of a difference between this tower and the pyramids. Subaru, I'm looking for things in common between this world and my original world. Did the past me do this too? Subaru began to feel ridiculous at having referred to himself as the past me. He felt as if he has slowly been going crazy ever since he'd lost his memories. In essence, there hadn't been a Subaru before or a Subaru after losing his memories. The past and the present too, his self was all one continuum. So, here too, Natsuki Subaru was. Subaru? Subaru shook his head as if he was trying to shake off the thoughts that had clouded his mind. He let out a small sigh. It was truly a nonchalant sigh. He had let it out completely unintentionally, in spite of having received something much more unexpected. It was no more, and no less than that. However, at the same time he had let out that sigh, he had felt a slight push on his back. Subaru. And as he let out that sigh, which was tantamount to no more than that, the world was flipped upside down. Subaru, His feet were off the ground. No, not just his feet, his whole body was. His whole body was overwhelmed by a feeling of weightlessness. He was falling down midair, losing sight of what was up or down. Engulfed by the sensation of weightlessness, Natsuki Subaru continues to fall. Subaru, dash. The sound of the wind whistled through his eardrums. He didn't get it. He didn't get anything. Right now, Subaru was falling. He was falling. Spinning round and round in midair as he falls down headfirst. Falling, falling, falling. As he falls, his thoughts caught up to him, still falling. Subaru, what? Wait. The world was spinning around his eyes. His limbs were flailing in midair. He does not know how many seconds had elapsed, but finally Subaru understood what had happened. Falling, he was falling. He was going to crash. He would hit the ground after falling down from above. He was swallowed by darkness as he fell past the spiral staircase. As he looked around desperately to all of his sides, Subaru could only see the tower's stone walls flowing past him. No, the walls were not flowing past him. It was Subaru's field of vision that was inverted as he fell down headfirst, so it was in fact him who was sweeping past them. The sensation of tumbling down caused him to retch, chunks of vomit flying out from him. Subaru, GHRKH. Subaru couldn't even breathe, his throat was clogged with vomit. His nose stung, tears of pain were streaming out of him, and his organs felt like they were all in the wrong place. His whole body felt like a chaotic mess. His face, clothes, and surely the floor would have ended up flecked with vomit. Emilia would be shocked. Beatrice would get angry at him. Ram would just coldly stare at him. Julius would give him a tired sigh. Echidna would shrug her shoulders. Meili would laugh. Shala would point at him. With such a feeling of frustration, Subaru had completely lost track of his own reality. Even if I search everywhere, I cannot find it. It's not up in the sky. It's not within me. Where did it go? Where is it? As well as his memory, Subaru had also lost himself. Subaru, mommy. Natsuki Subaru fainted just as that acrid mutter escaped from him. His consciousness halted, his thoughts were becoming fuzzy, and then. Hard ground. Subaru. Hey, Subaru, are you okay? As he woke up, the first thing he heard was her chiming, silver bell voice. He could feel her breath near his face and her fingers on his arm. Sensing this, Subaru roused himself into consciousness and slowly opened his eyes. In front of him was a frighteningly good-looking fairy of the moon. Subaru, is this Emilia-chan? Emilia, oh, Subaru, thank goodness. You woke up. I was really worried about you. Hearing Subaru speak, Emilia stroked her chest with a relieved look on her face. Subaru looked around the room in shock. He was in a room that was completely covered in ivy, even the bed he was lying in was woven from ivy. The beautiful girl next to him, Emilia, was gently patting her chest in relief. And right next to her stood a drill loli. Beatrice, Emilia, if you continue to be so gentle to him, Subaru will not reflect on his actions, I suppose. If you don't act tougher on him, he won't understand just how much he worried everyone. Emilia, that's right, though Beatrice, why do you say it like that? Subaru was missing, so we hurried to find him. When we did, he was collapsed, and you were about to cry. Beatrice, it would be nice if you didn't say the unneeded, I suppose. Beatrice turned away from them, her face turning red in anger. Subaru, who was watching this exchange, looked on in confusion. Subaru? What? Was it a dream? At hearing Subaru say that, both Emilia and Beatrice turned towards him. End of chapter 36 and 37, A Place of Relief.